of course, the first F1 Grand Prix in the States is in Miami in, when's that? April, beginning of May-ish time, from off the top of my head.
Sprint as well.
Yeah, of course it is. If Michael Andretti turns up in the paddock, is he going to be one of that shot, the sort of movie kind of shot of him walking down the paddock with all the team bosses looking on, going, "Oh, who's this guy?" Kind of deal, or is he just going to stay away? I feel like we'll hear some more from Michael once we get a bit closer to the IndyCar season beginning at St. Pete. Perhaps there'll be some dust settling period. We've got F1 testing coming up in the not too distant future, so I feel like this story might just go away a little bit over the next couple of weeks. Is it completely dead though? Well, who knows? But if F1 teams have got this pie they don't want to give any pieces away to, then it looks like for the moment, I don't think anything's going to change.
I really don't think an in-person meeting would have really changed any minds at all in this situation. Formula One really had their minds made up that they weren't going to let Andretti join them. And to be honest, I think Formula One had their minds made up months ago that Andretti wasn't just going to be able to enter the sport. So they felt like, it was time to just bring it to a head, just put it out there, and that we're not going to let Formula One come. But to Ben's point, I would really appreciate and respect Stefano Domenicali and everyone in management over there a lot more if they would just say the quiet part out loud that we don't want Andretti Global to be in Formula One because we're afraid that they're going to change the status quo of what it's always been here in Formula One. I really think that they're fearful of what Andretti could do in this sport, especially what we've seen the Andretti brand do across various disciplines of motorsport. So I really don't think a meeting face-to-face with Michael Andretti, Stefano Domenicali, and everyone at Formula One, I really don't think it would change anything. And the second part of that question you asked, should Michael Andretti just abandon all his hopes of being in F1 at this point? That's obviously up to him. But if it were me, I'd be thinking, like, why bother any further? It'd be like, we've done absolutely everything they've asked of us, and we're still not good enough for them. So, like, why should we continue to waste our time, on this project that they're simply not going to allow us to have? You like I was saying earlier, you want to be in a place where you're wanted. In Formula One, it doesn't seem like they want Andretti at all. So if I were Michael Andretti, I don't know if I can continue to, beat a dead horse, and just continue to hope that, someday that they're going to let me in or wait for a regime change at some point. And maybe that a new leader of Formula One will decide to let him in. Yeah, but at the end of the day, is this what Michael Andretti wants to do? And we'll see what he decides moving forward.
Kobe, I get what you're saying, and I completely understand. I mean, I would certainly feel that way if I was in this position. I don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to try to invest in putting an effort like this together. But I will say this about Michael Andretti. I mean, if the last 2+ years now were any indication, he doesn't quit. He doesn't give up. He doesn't give in. And I think that if Michael were to just sit back and say, all right, we hear you. We're not going to go forward with this anymore. Clearly, we're not welcome here, and waves the white flag, it would be admitting defeat. And I don't think that's in Michael Andretti's DNA. Now, looking ahead, they have said that they're going to keep the door open for 2028 when Cadillac and GM come in. And they've said that before. First it was $200 million, then it was $600 million. Then they had to, show evidence that the team was actually operating. I mean, they've moved the goalposts so many times that I don't trust them at this point. I also don't necessarily trust that. I mean, Michael has a car in the wind tunnel, for crying out loud, but he wasn't willing to make an in-person meeting. That just seems bizarre to me. It seems like there's something else going on there. I'm trying not to put the tinfoil hat on too much because I don't like doing that. But, I severely doubt that if that was the one thing standing in the way of this entry, that Michael couldn't have found a way to at least reschedule an in-person meeting or send some team member to an in-person meeting instead. So that seems quite ridiculous to me. But I don't know. Maybe if you continue to hold out a slight little bit of hope, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, this might give Colton Herta time to win the IndyCar championship in either 25, 26, or 27, and then he's got the full 40 points needed for a super license, and maybe we can finally put this, our long national or international nightmare will be over in 2028, and Colton Herta will be on the grid finally with Andretti Global. Maybe there's a slight slimmer of hope that's still left there. But I completely agree. I completely understand with what you're saying there, Kobe, as well. If it were me in this situation, I don't know that I would have the strength and the willpower to continue trying to put this effort forward. But I think Michael Andretti does. And I think that, with how far he's come already, how much he's invested already, to just wave the white flag at this point, I don't think is in his DNA. So I think he's going to continue to fight this and ride this as long as the wheels are still on it until the wheels fall off. And because they've left the door slightly open again, I think we might be revisiting this conversation multiple times over the next few years.
What's your closing argument then? Do you reckon that there could be an option that Andretti maybe take over Haas? That was a rumor that's been going around. Or do you reckon that we're going to have to wait for a long, long time to have them back in?
Well, Josh, I'm glad you brought that up, because I remember Bernie Ecclestone, and Bernie has many, many flaws. Don't get me wrong. I would be willing to welcome him back a little bit more with open arms if he weren't so, insane on certain issues as well. But one thing that I remember Bernie saying to Gene Haas is, why don't you just buy a team? And specifically, I guess you had Manor and Caterham at the time. And again, people forget that we had 11 teams as recently as 8 years ago, because Haas's first season was Manor's last. Gene comes in, he starts his brand new team from scratch, and Manor end up going into administration. 2016 is their last year. And I think Gene really sat back and thought, you know what, Bernie was probably right about that. It might have been easier just to go to Manor and try to have a conversation about buying the team. And now I look at where Haas are, and they've had, several down years in a row here. I know they really looked like they were coming into their own in 2018, and then the Rich Energy saga happened, and it's just been all downhill from there. I've got a feeling that it would make the most sense if Gene just said, let's forget about this. It was a fun little experiment. It didn't work out. Let's focus on the NASCAR team. And by the way, the NASCAR team needs some focus right now because they're not doing so well either. Let's focus on that. Let's go back to the basics and what we know best. And let's hand this team off and give a head start to a guy who is clearly very passionate about this sport and wants to be here and wants to run competitively here. I think that would just put all the, and then you have your 10th entry ready to go. It's not like you're expanding the grid and you don't need to jump through all these hoops. I say that they probably still make them jump through more hoops than they have to, because this is Formula One and they probably just don't want the name there to begin with. But I think that would be a solution, a creative solution that would bring everybody together on this issue and would probably make the most sense in the long run. And I'll answer Rodney's question here, and then I'll get on out of here, get ready to tape Women in Motorsports with Joe and Isha. Serious question. Since Liberty Media and the push for the new Drive to Survive audience, I've noticed calls for making F1 nationalistic. Why? Not entirely sure what you mean by that. Are you talking like, I don't know, Matt can speak to the A1 Grand Prix a little bit? Is that what you mean by nationalistic, like having each country put their own I don't know.
It was originally, wasn't it?
I've heard murmurs that they want to bring A1 Grand Prix back. I've heard rumors that they want to try to incorporate motorsports into the Olympics a little bit. But I must confess I haven't heard those rumors specifically when it comes to Formula One themselves. And then I guess you might be talking about Michael as a driver here. I know that his stint with McLaren didn't go so well in 1993. He did have just some guy named Ayrton Senna as his teammate. You might have heard of him, so I'm sure that was the easiest.
And some guy called Mick Hackett that came in and took his seat.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, you can talk about how poorly Michael Andretti did have one podium. I think it might have actually been ultimately his last race before he lost that season. Seems the only thing Andretti has going is dad's name and nationalistic support. Well, he definitely has those things. I think you can just go back and listen to the entire first 47 minutes of this show and listen to some of the other things that we think he has and brings to the table as well. And this point about being a back marker. Again, I don't know how much more you can expect from a brand new team. I thought like when Roman Grosjean finished 6th in Australia, I still vividly remember him coming over the radio and saying, guys, listen to me. This is a win for us. This is a win. And it was, because for a brand new team, I think it was the first brand new team since Toyota in the early 2000s to come in and score points.
Yeah, on debut.
It was an incredible run, and they only finished in the points a few more times later that season. They followed it up with 5th in Bahrain, I think, the very next race. And then they kind of came back down to earth a little bit. But, Haas looked like, you think of where Haas is now. I think of where Haas was in 2016, and then built on that to finish fifth. I mean, it was a handful of self-inflicted errors. I think they could have been the best of the rest and beaten Renault for P4 in 2018. I mean, they were that strong that year. But I look at that team and I think to myself, I mean, that you're telling me Andretti couldn't do that? You're telling me that's the standard that we're setting here. Andretti couldn't, with all the resources that they're pulling in. I would not put results like that past them. And then on top of that, I don't know how much more you can expect. I mean, I'll say it again. 21 of 22 races won by the same team. I mean, you could make the argument Mercedes aren't competitive right now. You could make the argument Ferrari isn't competitive. They had a less than 5% win rate last year. They only won one race. They're not very competitive. But nobody's competitive because nobody can compete with Red Bull. How are you defining competitive here? Because it sure isn't where Haas is here in 2024 and the last couple of years in particular. And a day in my life adding, will Haas survive the next 2 years?
No.
I don't know. I mean, well, I think there's a compelling argument that it could be no, but everybody signed the Concord agreement. Everybody has sponsors and everything. Haas certainly isn't in as good a shape as they once were. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, Gene has been on record multiple times saying, listen, if we can't get to that point eventually, where we're competing for glory and success like we do on the NASCAR side of things, then we have to take a step back and wonder what we're doing here. Which again, I think is even more reason to believe. Why would he not just say, clearly it isn't working, let's hand the team off to somebody who wants to make this work? And I think that's a solution that works for everybody.
That first comment as well, but what do they need to do about being competitive? That's the problem. As we discussed earlier on in the show, they've hit every single mark that that Formula One have asked of them and the teams have asked of them. You can't come in unless you pay money. Okay, we'll pay how much? We'll pay. You can't come in unless you've got an engine. Okay, look, we're bringing some manufacturers in. We're bringing two different eras in, Cadillac and GM. What more do you want? There isn't anything else they can do. It's coming down to the fact is that they just don't want them in Formula One. And I think I figured out, guys, what it is they're missing. They're not sponsored by anything. I mean, they're not sponsored by OnlyFans. They're not sponsored by a Twitch. They're not sponsored by YouTube. They're not sponsored by any naughty websites. They're not sponsored by something that has got the integrity of Formula One behind it as well. And I think they should look to the great teams like Surtees, who had Durex on the front of their cars and got taken off television for 1976 and denied us that great season being able to be witnessed on television as well. So, in terms of it, where do you want to go in Formula One? What do you want to do? I mean, Stewart came in 1970. This is another thing as well, because I know, Ben, you've got to go to record the show. They said that they don't think that they can be competitive by building a car for 25 regulations and then doing a whole nother one for 26 regulations, when Jackie Stewart did exactly the same thing in 1997, built a car for the 97 rules and built a car for the 98 rules, and won races. That team won and then became Jaguar, then became Red Bull. So it doesn't make sense.
Go ahead, Matt.
Can I just Rodney's question there? Why should there be, or why does there have to be? It doesn't have to be, but there is one, and it wants to come. And Formula One are saying, well, no, you can't come. So it doesn't have to be. If there wants to be a Team USA, and there was one in A1GP, the likes of Scott Speed drove for them, and Jonathan Somerton and Ryan Hunter-Ray, but they weren't very competitive in the spec series. Andretti have more money put together in this, and they've not got anywhere, than Manor, Caterham, HRT put together. I know they were running to a cost cap in 2010, but it's all about the cash and the backing and the manufacturer support, which so they've got everything going for them, and the door's still being closed in their face. And this is what we just can't get our heads around.
To Rodney's point here, I mean, I don't know about you. Well, Josh and Matt, you're in the UK. Kobe, I don't know about you. I see more Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren stuff than I see Haas gear right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I see McLaren jackets everywhere. I see people in Ferrari hats. I don't see very much Haas gear out there. But we have an American team right now, and I think if that American team were running well, there would be some support. But there has still been a boom here in the United States when it comes to Formula One popularity, with Haas being, in some years, in some cases, the worst team on the grid. And that's not hyperbole. That they were literally the worst team on the grid 2 of the last 3 years. And yet this sport is still succeeding in America the way it is. Now, I know Andretti would be even more American, deeply American than Haas is, because obviously Gene is an American, but Gunther Steiner's not, and they don't employ American drivers. But the reality of it is we still have a team based here. We still have a home team that if they were to ever by some miracle win a race, we would hear the Star Spangled Banner on the podium. And yet we still have this boom here. So I don't know if that's necessarily the case there, but that, all hopes and dreams ride on Andretti. And if Andretti, aren't competitive right out of the gate, then they're going to lose viewership. Are they going to lose more viewership than they're going to lose because of what they're doing right now? Because I could tell, I said it earlier in the show, I'm not very enthusiastic about this sport right now. They don't want Andretti coming in. I guess they don't want my viewership. I mean, that's the way I'm feeling. And we can keep. We're approaching an hour already, guys. I apologize here. I don't mean to monopolize your show.
Jackson,
come on, but
sorry, man. Jackson says, "Put Motorsport on, I beg you." So if we can find Jackson's comment somewhere. Jose says, "Hi guys, this is discussing on Big F1 since the mid '90s as well." Yeah, all of us here as well. This year I'm thinking of just dropping this. They don't care. See, this is the thing. This is what the fans say. They don't like what has happened. They don't like it. So I think we better move on because as I said we are 55 minutes in.
Let me just say one more thing and then I'll get on out of here. To Rodney in the chat specifically and anybody else who is maybe trying to look at this from F1's perspective. They've said that they're open to as many as 12 teams and 24 cars.
Yeah.
If Andretti can't get in, how can anyone else?
That's what I said.
Why are you saying the doors are open if a team like this and I think I saw a comment in, has Andretti ever built any car or parts? They have a model in the wind tunnel right now. That is how serious they are about this. They have already started building that with no guarantee, and it was proven today, no guarantee that their entry would be approved by Formula One. Yet they've already made it that far. If that doesn't show how serious you are about this, I don't know what does. So if they can't get in, then what's the point of having those 2 extra spots? And we'll leave it there.